Halo Sobat Bola.com, balik lagi di program Bola Break bersama saya Gregah Nuriksani. Masih ya di suasana Ramadan dan sebenarnya bulan Ramadan ini momen-momen yang kita tunggu sebenarnya kita semua tunggu karena satu Ramadannya yang kedua sepak bolanya karena timnas di bulan Maret di bulan Ramadan ini akan menghadapi Australia dan juga Bahrain di momen-momen yang spesial di bulan yang spesial dan kali ini lagi-lagi saya tidak sendirian, artinya saya akan berbincang dengan salah satu mantan pemain yang pernah bermain di Indonesia juga dan beliau juga menghabiskan banyak karirnya di Australia. Namanya adalah Mister Naum Sekulovski atau dia mau dipanggil Batka. Batka itu tadi dia cerita katanya artinya brother. Nah, oke Batka, how are you?
Very good, thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. So it's gonna be a good period of our national team, Indonesia and Australia. Would you please talk about the Group C competition in World Cup qualifiers? Is match day seven gonna be decisive?
Yeah, I think it's really quite a tight group when you look at it.
Yeah.
I mean, when I look at it from an Australian perspective, there's definitely a lot of internal pressure that we've put on the Socceroos to finish in that top two.
Yeah.
So really, these next two games that we've got coming up, obviously first Indonesia at home and then China away, are pretty important because from that second place below, the table is very very tight.
Yeah.
And obviously we've seen after the initial result with Indonesia in the first leg, it's not going to be an easy task. It's not
Mm.
going to be an easy game. So I've noticed from Popovic's squad announcement that he's gone fairly experienced with his squad. So it should be a tough game, but we look forward to the challenge.
Yeah. I mean, how important is it, for Australia, for the Socceroos, to not losing points in this period, especially in the match day seven and then eight, and then because we have four games left, right? How important is it for Australia not to losing points?
Especially these next two games, particularly the game against Indonesia at home. Like these are must-win games. And then obviously the China game away is a very, very winnable game also. So for us, like I said, the aim will be to get maximum points over these next two games. Although we know at the same time it's going to present a pretty big challenge. Um, they're they're competitors that obviously from an Indonesian perspective, we lost 2 points when we played away. And we've seen that the global game of football is a lot closer than it was many, many years ago. I mean, the Indonesian national team has improved over the years. And in general, world football has caught up. So these international games are very difficult. But to answer your question, we aim to get maximum points over the next two games.
Yeah, I don't think Australia lost 2 points. It's us Indonesia that gained 1 point against Australia. So were you surprised to see, for example, Saudi team struggling at the moment, and that Indonesian national team could actually compete with other team, including Australia?
Oh, look, for me, I was blessed to spend some time in Indonesia, obviously with Persema, and to be perfectly honest, I never thought that the quality was that far away. If anything, I think the technicality of the Indonesian players was a lot better. It's just potentially tactically and that piece in terms of being organised as a team is probably where they maybe fell short. But like I said, the fact that they are where they are, and maybe I was trying to be a little bit humble in my response about the last result, But this is where I think world football is changing, and with under the right leadership, I think any team can compete against any team, right? And then it depends on conditions, where you're playing, home or away. It is quite interesting to see the Saudis where they are, considering their group of players and the talent. And in the same breath, it's quite refreshing to see that the Indonesians are in the mix as well.
Yeah,
And I think from an Asian football perspective, I think it's beneficial for the game if the groups are quite tight. Yeah, I know. Selfishly, as an Australian, I can say that we want to win every game and qualify in the top two. But there's something that's a little bit poetic about it, where games are a lot tighter within this section of qualification, and I think for the viewer, doesn't matter whether it's Australian, Indonesian, Saudi, Chinese, it makes this qualification process a lot more interesting.
yeah. It's so tight that the Group C, in fact, that it had Australia had to change from Graham Arnold to Tony Popovich. And did you think that Tony Popovich came just in time, or did you feel that Graham Arnold should have given much time?
Look, in terms of timing, it's a tough one. It's never a good time to obviously be let go, and it's probably never a good time to take over. Right? It's such an important position. But again, like, these guys are ultimate professionals. Whether it's Graham Arnold, leaving the squad, and obviously he's had success with the squad, or Tony Popovich coming in, mid campaign. These gentlemen are both ultimate pros. So to Graham Arnold, we obviously say thank you for his service. The Popovich, it probably was, and always is difficult as a head coach to come in mid campaign. But again, Popovich is an ultimate pro. He's got Hayden Fox under him, and the team around them are very strong. And I think they've jumped into it with a lot of confidence, in that that they prepare uh, from A to Z, and make sure they do everything they can to get the Socceroos to the next phase of qualification. Like I said, predominantly, we're all hoping that's within the top two. So yeah, although it presents its difficulties, I think both of these gentlemen are professional enough, obviously, for Graham Arnold to be stepping out, and then for Popper to be taking over when he did. For me, there's no easy job in world football. Being a coach at the highest level is extremely difficult. But both of these gentlemen, and now obviously Popper and his team, are very well prepared.
Yeah, confidence. I think I have to agree with you about Popovich because earlier today, it has been announced, the squad in the Australia squad, and
Yes,
if I'm not
yes.
mistaken, there are six new players, new debutants, and some players like Jackson Evan, Matthew Ryan, BH, uh, still they saved their place. What do you think about the Australia squad with six new debutants? Is it something? Does it tell you that Popovich is quite confident enough?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what I like about his selections, I think he's brought Teague into this squad. Like you said, there's six debutants. I like the blend of players he has in the squad. He has a blend of strong, experienced players, both from an overseas standpoint, and then a local A League standpoint, and then there's that bravery that is shown,
Yeah.
as the head coach, to get these debutants in as well. But again, he would know all of these players and all the new players along with the old players, and he'd understand what dynamic he needs in this squad for these two particular games. Obviously, one home, one away. So again, I think you said confidence. That's a very important word, and I completely agree. He's definitely confident, and I think there's an element of bravery there, right? To bring in six debutants, you have to be pretty brave. But I think it's a perfect blend, right? Because we see a lot of these players here at local level. And they're knocking on the door. They're always knocking on the door of the Socceroos. They're performing really well at local level. So they deserve a chance like any other Australian footballer, no matter whether they're playing, locally within the A League or yeah, in the overseas clubs from an international perspective.
Yeah, and I saw your video in previous talk with A-League production in YouTube that you mentioned some names, young inform players, and some of them didn't make it to the squad. How do you feel about it?
Yes. Look, for me, I think for these players, it's always going to be a long shot, right? So I think one particular one that I mentioned was Noah Botic. At the moment, he's the top goal scorer in the league. Western United are sitting at second place. So they're quite they're in a strong position in the A League, and he's been one of their stronger players and most consistent players. So that's where I was coming from that perspective. I think again Popovic has showed some bravery. You know, in this particular instance, it might just be a timing piece. It might not be the right time for Botic to come in,
Yeah,
considering the importance of the qualification phase that we're actually in. You know, maybe if we were in that top two and we were 3 or 6 points away and we were quite comfortable, then maybe he can be a little bit more aggressive in bringing in some of the young boys. So, like I said, I think he still has a really good blend. For the likes of Noah Botic and some of these younger guys, it might just be about biding their time, and perhaps once we've solidified a spot or we're a lot more secure, then he can bring him in. But again, I think one of the other ones that I did mention was Teague. I'm really happy to see him in the squad. I mean, Popovic has worked together with Teague,
yeah,
so it'll be really interesting to see how he goes in that dynamic. And like I said, I think as we get hopefully closer to that qualification, he might be a little bit more adventurous with bringing in some of these really young boys that are quite
yeah.
green but are performing well on the local stage.
Yeah. Does it prove that this is the best time, this is the best period for players to play in A League and in Australian League to compete? Is that the case? That because I see about 40% of the squad of Australia of the squad Socceroos come from A League. Does it prove in this case?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one thing to take into account again, when I played A League, it was in its inaugural year, and I played in the system for 5 years. And I think one thing that I've noticed this year that I've never noticed in the last, you know, even 2 or 3 years is how young the A
Yeah,
League actually is in terms of the playing rosters. So we're seeing a lot of young talent getting senior football consistently. So I think the byproduct of having 40% of Popper's squad being from the A League is exactly that. It's the fact that we've got young players and maybe that middle-aged bracket as well, playing consistent senior football at a decent level, and it's meant that we've been able to not only produce footballers that can play at national team level, but it's also meant that I think we've had the most successful year from a league perspective, anyway,
yeah,
from a transfer dollar figure perspective as well. So it's a couple of really good metrics when you think about it. To have that many young players playing in the league, to have that many players representing the Socceroos, and then the last one to have that many transfers, or to have the most successful transfer season so far in any A League season.
okay. Now, given the fact that Australia is filled from players from the local league, from A League, how do you see the Indonesian national team? Because it's accommodated from abroad players. Like I think like 80% or 90% of the players of Indonesia are playing abroad.
Abroad.
Yeah,
Yeah, look, it's again each case is different, and each national team is different, right? I think ultimately you have to select your best, your best 20, your best 24, whatever that squad number is. And the reality for Indonesia and other squads is, your best 20 or 24 players might be, predominantly overseas. I
yeah,
mean, I remember a time when I look at Australia's golden generation, which is, the Socceroos that I used to follow, and the generation that's probably, 3 or 4 years older than I was, this was the team that went to Germany and lost to Italy,
Yeah.
right, in that eventful game. I mean, I think from memory, 90% of that team was playing overseas. So during that period in Australian football, that's where our best players were. So I just think, from an Indonesian perspective, if that's where the talent is, that's where they have to be selected from. And then it probably it's probably from an Indonesian football perspective, how can we increase the talent locally or improve the league locally to be able to get a lot more local players in that national team squad. I must admit, since the time I left Indonesia, I haven't followed the Indonesian league progressively. So I don't know where it's at, but one thing that really impressed me from the time I was there is, I thought the Indonesian players were some of the most technically gifted players that I'd seen. I think it was just a matter of, a little bit more tactical education,
Yeah.
and then more organisation from that from a tactical perspective.
Yeah. Back to Indonesian national team. It was I was surprised that your statement about changing coaches mid-season or mid competition, because Indonesia is also changing their head coaches, from Shin Tae-yong to Patrick Kluivert.
Yes.
Um, what do you think the implications that sacking Shin Tae-yong and then appointing Patrick Kluivert? It's different though in it. I mean, Graham Arnold was sacked under big disappointment, while Shin Tae-yong was arguably he was in a good position. What do you think about it?
Yeah, so like, and that's probably the one that was that's a little bit odd, right? It's understanding the motivation as to why. I think from a Socceroos perspective, it was quite clear. Whereas in this instance, I'm not too sure whether something happened, maybe that the people don't know about. I mean, there's always things that happen within the squads. Was it players? Was it coach? We just don't know what happens behind closed doors.
Yeah.
It did seem quite odd, and like you said, the challenge will be now is how that impacts the greater playing squad, right? I mean, Clivert is obviously a massive name in football. So I'm not too sure what the rest of the campaign looks like, but I think we'll get a pretty good indication come next week on the 20th when we see Indonesia play the Socceroos.
Yeah. Would it be crucial though? I mean, the changing from Shin Tae-yong and to Patrick Kluivert mid-season.
Oh, look, you know, it probably goes one of two ways. It might lift the team, and have a really positive impact. But the challenge in terms of that having an impact is, your campaign was actually going quite well at that point in time. Was there a real need for change? So it probably depends how the players respond, to this. So this will be interesting for me to see during next week's game, whether it has a positive impact or whether it has a negative impact. I mean, in my maybe not so professional opinion, if things were going well, potentially there's no need to unsettle the playing squad and the national team. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens next week.
Yeah, it could be going either way, right? Do you expect a massive transition in term of playing style, because Patrick Kluivert is known for his attacking style, while Shin Tae-yong is probably like a textbook. Do you think the transition would be massive?
Look, you know, for him, for Clivert, he's had a limited time to work with the squad. I mean, for a lover, someone that loves attacking football,
Yeah.
it'll be great to see Indonesia play that way with that attacking flair. Because I think, again, like I said, technically gifted players. I think attacking something that comes quite natural to them. So it'd be nice to see that. I guess the challenge would be how quick you can implement a style of play, right? And especially within the international framework where you don't have a lot of time to work, tactically with the squad. It's how quick can you change that from the way that they did play previously. So it'll be interesting. I'd love to see it. I
Mm.
haven't seen any footage from a training perspective. So I can't really say or comment on that front. But it would be nice. It would be nice to see some attacking flair from Indonesia.
Okay. Um, our players, naturalization, our program. What do you think about naturalization in general, in your perspective?
Um, yeah, in general, look, it's probably not something that's massive in Australia.
Yeah.
Like I said, it's probably more so in Indonesia. Look, I'm a traditionalist, right? So I'd love you know, I'd love to see, it wouldn't have to be, 60 or 70%, but at least 50% of that squad coming out of, Indonesia's top
Yeah.
flight. Like that for me would be a success,
Mm.
rather than the naturalization. And again, depending on how quick you can turn around local football, it'll be great to have 70-80%, just Indonesians playing out of the Indonesian league versus having to go through the naturalization process, because there's something special about putting on um, you know your uh, your national team shirt. Yeah, and there is meaning and pride around that. Again, not to say that that doesn't exist through players that get naturalized, but I think it's quite different when you're born and raised and lived in a country, and that's been your home. Then there's a special the special feeling attached to that.
Okay. So, Batka, you've played here. You've played here in Indonesia. At the time, what do you feel about the football here? The talents, the structure, the football knowledge. Like the vision of the players. What did you say about Indonesian football at the time?
Look, I really enjoyed Indonesian football. Like I said, there was technically, I felt the players were extremely gifted,
Yeah.
from young to old. So that was really really surprising for me coming from Australia, because um, there was a less of an emphasis on technicality, and it's more of a physical game. So it was quite refreshing. I mean, whilst I'm Australian born, my background is Macedonian, and at the time I had my head coach and assistant coach Slave Radovski and Stevo Mitrovski of Macedonian heritage. And of course, Macedonia and the Balkans has been known to be called the Brazil of Europe, right?
Yeah.
And so I was blessed to have them coaches play under a structure and a system where technique was embraced,
Yeah.
and we had that technicality within the local players. So I loved playing with players that were really technical. The one thing Coach Slave brought as well with Stevo was really that team structure, like I said, and that tactical perspective. So we had a really good combination of technically gifted players, and we were tactically sound as well. And we put a really strong team together. I've got very, very fond memories of playing, Persibaya in a sellout crowd. I think the from the day I left Indonesia, which is when I did my ACL in a home game, I think at that point we were second on the ladder. So for a team that had a pretty low budget, we had a really, really successful year. But the football in general was exciting. It was really, really good to watch. It was predominantly local footballers with, I think, two or three local players within each team at the time. And there was the right idea, from memory. I think there was a good influx of local and international coaches, and the league was building. I think the only unfortunate thing was I think there was the two leagues at that point in time, and yeah, I'm not too sure what happened after that point, but yeah, my time in Indonesia was something that we'll cherish for a very long time. And I look forward to bringing my family back and showing them, where we lived, where we played in Malang, because they're very special memories. And I think for a country that's 300 plus million people
Yeah.
in population, I think there's a very, very bright future if they get things right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's almost 300. It's 280 million people.
Wow,
So
amazing.
baik, Sobat Bola.com, barusan kita udah dengerin ya diskusi bareng dengan Batka alias nama aslinya Naum Seklovski mengenai Australia melawan Indonesia nanti, dan dia juga banyak perspektif yang menarik ya soal sepak bola Indonesia, soal timnas khususnya. Kemudian dia juga tadi menceritakan sedikit soal pengalamannya di Indonesia dan apa namanya beberapa kali juga dia menyebut bahwa dia berharap sebenarnya timnas Indonesia itu bisa dihuni oleh uh, lebih banyak pemain dari liga lokal gitu, yang mudah-mudahan aja apapun itu terutama yang paling penting sebenarnya yang penting kita Indonesia bisa lolos ke Piala Dunia. Oke, sampai jumpa di lain waktu. Saya Gregan Nusani pamit undur diri. Bye.